There we go. Live. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
I love that the greeting has caught on to other members of the AutoCrit team. Like, hi, everybody.
So exciting.
It is so exciting. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I see lots of folks out there already. Hey, Irv. Hey, Chrissy. Great to see everybody. Let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. And how exciting is this? Hey, Tom. Hey, Cheryl. I see lots of familiar names and faces out there.
I know. So many Mighty Networks people, so many Facebook group people.
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Hi, Larry.
Yeah. Larry.
In South Africa. Ooh, hi.
Ooh, yeah. Martin.
Sweden. Hey, Jennifer.
Look at Martin. My story looks nothing like my first draft. Boy, we feel.
Yes. That is so true.
Hey, Liz. Jennifer's here from northern Sweden. Oh my gosh. I love how worldwide we are. I also love, by the way, that apparently it just turned into lawn care day outside my window. So if it's a little loud, I'll be muting while Catherine is doing the majority of our show today. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited. We are nearing the end, and I, of course, don't have my calendar beside me. What on earth? But we are nearing the end of week 2 of our community writing challenge, right?
That's right.
So, perfect time to really dig into the gosh, sorry about that background noise there. Really dig into the editing part, which I love, right? I'm a little biased working with AutoCrit. I am like a big editing nerd. I'm going to just plug in some headphones and see if that helps with the background noise a little bit.
Yeah.
See?
So yeah, everybody, how are you doing? Drop your word count in the comments for us. Where are you at?
Yeah. Yes, that I love how many comments we're getting around. Like, I started at this word count and then I edited and now I'm at this new lower word count. Efficiency is wonderful. So everybody's doing so great. I'm so excited. So just a couple of reminders for those who are maybe tracking a little ahead of the oh, Vicki, it was just me, had you open in 2 tabs. You can never get enough of us. I love it. I love it. Couple of reminders, the submissions, the formal submissions, if you want to submit your work for consideration to be chosen for inclusion in our trophy anthology, this is the one from last year, those submissions will open on Monday the 24th. And don't worry, we will be providing all the details of how and where and when and how to format and all that jazz as we get a little bit closer to that date. So we want you to have some time with your manuscript. Make sure it's polished as much as you can polish it. If you find that you're in the weeds, you're in that nitty-gritty and just fiddling with individual words, maybe let it rest a little bit, then come back and give it a final read with some fresh eyes. And oh my goodness, look at Larry in the comments. 5,000 words exactly.
Whoa.
I love that. I love that.
I see a lot of great word counts in here today. 49, 42, 47.
And I love the progress that people are making as they're editing. Realize the section I didn't even need. So that efficiency and making sure that every section, every paragraph, every scene earns its place in your manuscript, especially with a short story. Now, Tom had started at 5,600 words and then realized that's a whole section as he's editing. So terrific, great progress, everyone. We will be we'll be releasing again information about how and where to submit your final versions as we get closer to the 24th. But today we have a special treat for you. I am here with my colleague, Catherine. You guys probably all know her from the Facebook group and from our Mighty Networks members only community. And we have something really special.
Yes.
We reached out to our our members community. So this was an opportunity for only members, and said, hey, if you would like us to grab a copy of your short story and run it through AutoCrit and use it as a live demo, we'll do
Very
some.
brave.
Oh my goodness, right? And the response was just tremendous. So we had a lot of great volunteers for this. And Catherine has selected one or two that we're going to really dig into today. So thank you, first of all, to our members community. Thank you for those of you who volunteered, who sent in their works, and are willing to place your work under the AutoCrit microscope with us today.
Yes.
With that, let's dive in, Catherine. I'm going to pull your screen up because we have content teed up, ready to have a look at some of our member stories
Yes.
in AutoCrit.
We're so excited, you guys, and you did not make it easy on us at all.
Right, right.
But I am really glad, Jennifer, that I saw that you popped on from Sweden, because we did select your story for the edit today. And if your story didn't get selected, that's okay. We still want to see it in the short story submission. So please send them, because they all look so good.
I know, right? Right.
It's really hard. But let me see here. So we've got our summary report pulled up right now. This summary report, for those of you who have wondered what the scorecard is for a while, shows you your percentage based on the category that you compare your book to, of, I guess, standards for that genre. I don't know. Get all tongue-tied here. This is not a score that you want to get up to a 100, because it's more than just grammatical errors. And if you pulled your report and you had a higher than 70 or a lower than 70, of course you can always improve, and that's what we're going to go over today. But it gives you sort of a fun bullseye of, here is where my book ranks compared to the other fantasy books, in this case, that are in the system.
Yep. And I love that you pointed out that the goal is not to get to 100. So definitely, it not only is that not the goal, but I don't even think it's really possible per se. Like, I've seen some very, very high scores, but
Yes.
the balance there is so, so important, to say, okay, AutoCrit is showing me these suggestions and things to take a look at, but don't let the software bully you, right? Don't let it control your voice. It is just software. And while it is very, very smart software, we really just want to help hone and polish your work rather than take control of it. So we often get questions about, how can I get 100? Is this score good? The goal here, and what Catherine's showing you on your screen right now, is to set that initial benchmark, right? So with this story, with Jennifer's story, we're comparing it to fantasy as an entire genre. You can also, as a professional level subscriber, compare to an individual author. If you're emulating, say, Anne Rice, that's always my go-to, because she does like a weird blend of like horror and romance, vampires in love, and so forth. So as a pro subscriber, you have that option, right? To say, oh, I really am going for that Dan Brown vibe. So I'm going to compare and benchmark against Dan Brown as an example. The key here is to pick the one that vibes most with you, that feels most comfortable and aligns best with your work. And then don't change it, right? As you're doing your editing, you'll see your scores go up, possibly down, and that's okay. You'll see them change. But as long as you're keeping that comparison goalpost, if you will, set, then you'll see that progress that you're looking for. And so I see a lot of folks in the chat, like, I'm so relieved. I didn't know if I was supposed to get to 100. So it's not to get to 100. Vicky has a great goal, aiming for like low 90s, high 80s. Tremendous, great goal. But seeing where we start with this one, the 76.59, and then seeing how some of our edits and our creative decisions, with the help of AutoCrit, will improve that score, that's what you're going for. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yep. And just for comparison, most of our know your score authors range in the 80s, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. So that's okay. It's okay to
Yeah.
fall in the 80s.
Yes,
Because of course,
absolutely.
there's things like dialogue and your narrative that you want to sound like people would actually say too, and not just grammatically correct. All right. So Jennifer has a 76.59 starting score. That is a great starting score, Jennifer. Congratulations on that. And we're going to scroll down and take a look at the biggest areas of improvement or opportunities for improvement, if you want to put it that way. Every book has its own unique fingerprint. And if you're an author that's used AutoCrit for a while, you may know that every book you put in is going to have a different fingerprint. I've now put 4 books through AutoCrit, and every single one has a very different fingerprint. This fingerprint is your key areas to look at. If you don't know where to start on your reports, run your summary report, scroll down here to your overall score, and look at the ones with the categories with the highest number of indicators. In this case, strong writing, followed by word choice, followed by repetition, which again will be different for every person. And those are all tabs that you can see up here along the top. And I've actually pre-pulled some of these for us to look through together on the live to see if we can bring that score up just a little bit. Scrolling down a little further, you're going to see a readability summary. These are the number of words you use, just in case you needed a word counter, although most of us in this challenge are like, look at every single word.
Yes, yes.
And oh, Beth, that reminds me. Yes, the title. If you go a little bit over 5,000 to give us the title, that's fine.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
But number of uncommon words is something to really pay attention to here. Most fantasy books right now are being published anywhere from the 4th to 6th grade reading level. And that doesn't mean a 4th to 6th grade reader audience. It means a 4th to 6th grade readability for somebody to be able to read your book naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, this varies by genre. Science fiction has a higher grade level beginning platform or threshold versus young adult, which is lower, and you can adjust accordingly. But ideally, 4th to 6th grade, 4th to 7th grade is fine. Anything like 8th grade and above is really hard for just general audiences as a rule of thumb for fantasy, which is what we're running here.
Mm-hmm.
So this one is right in that sweet spot of a 5.2 here on this scale at the end, and then a 4 on the New Dale. So good job. You're right where you need to be there. You do have a lot of uncommon words, which we're going to take a look at in this live. Out of 4,800 words, a 4th of them are uncommon words, which could be names of characters, names of places, and if so, that's fine. We just want to make sure we don't have too many words that people aren't used to and are going to Google every few seconds like that. You've got 419 sentences. You've got the desired waterfall effect here, where you've got 198 of your long, and then you see it taper down to the bottom. These 40 plus sentences stands out a little bit to me. That's a little long for a single sentence. So we went ahead and pulled that report up that we'll be looking at today. But 12 words for an average sentence is fine. You want to break up, for those of you who are newer to the software, your long paragraphs with some shorter paragraphs, because otherwise your eyes get tired.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good thing to have some short paragraphs, but you also don't want to have so many short paragraphs that they're really just sentences as paragraphs. So it needs to be a good mix, and this looks like it's a good mix. Here's the paragraph analysis for us by word count. She has 8 slow-paced paragraphs, which AutoCrit will point out, and that's comparing your paragraphs to the other paragraphs you have in your document. So you can look at those and see if those are intentional or not and which ones you want to keep. And then down here is my favorite section of the summary report for my own books. These are your gauges they will tell you how you compare to whatever you chose. So if you chose a specific author, we'll say Anne Rice, it's going to compare your books to the books of Anne Rice's that we have on file and say whether you have more, about the same, less. The idea is to get in between that average and great mark somewhere, ideally, and to try to stay out of the red. So these standards will change based on whoever you haven't compared to. Fantasy is going to have way more leeway for adverbs and showing versus telling than, let's say, a business report, because AutoCrit does do business documents too, but not for the short story competition. So here we see that her use of adverbs is great. It's far beyond the average for, far beyond, not as in she's using too many, that's over on this other side. Far beyond as in she's using less adverbs, which means more showing versus telling ideally. Generic descriptions are in the gray, so we're actually going to run that report today. And then that ties into showing versus telling in a different way. So when we go over to the showing versus telling tab in a minute, you'll be able to see the difference between the showing versus telling and the generic descriptions and the adverbs. Filler words, you do need some filler words in your document or it just doesn't sound realistic for fiction. But you don't want to have so many filler words that you're adding in words that don't need to be there. Had this, have that, if this, if that. My pain one, I'd love to hear some of your pain words. My pain one is I tried to blank and I tried to not blank. It's like instead of just saying flat out, I this or I that. So I have to go mental Yoda on my book. Like she does go in the room or she does not go in the room. She doesn't try to go in the room unless the door's stuck or something like that. So, yeah, those are my key killer words. Then we've got her power words here, a really good spread of power words. The number one being fear, which ties with lust. And that is an intriguing story right there, Jennifer.
I am so intrigued with this. Mm-hmm.
Fear and lust is number two, the two top, tied by encouragement and anger. So we have the makings of a good story right here for sure. And then down here, we've got a few more pie graphs just to give you an idea of where you stand. Dialogue tags, which are said and asked versus others. For first person like myself, you want to make sure that your dialogue tags are pretty consistent. There shouldn't be said and asked if you're writing in first person. So I sort of use the pie chart on the reverse as well. This helps you make sure that you're staying consistent with the tags you're using. And then over here on the right, you see the tenses. If you're writing in past tense, then you want to make sure you haven't slipped up and used a present tense verb somewhere or a future tense verb somewhere unless it's in dialogue. And then point of view is also run here. You can see the majority of her story without even having read her story. At a glance, I could say her story is a first person, past tense story.
I think it's third person, right?
Oh, sorry, third person. Thank you. Third person past tense story. And because of that, it actually surprises me that she has the 5 said and asked as opposed to more. And it makes me hope there's not a lot of says and asks. And down here, we've got sentence patterns. And these are things that help your story read smoother. Cliches, redundancies, initial pronouns and names, which is very high here. We usually try to aim for about 40, between 40 and 50, so a little over on the initial pronouns and names. And that means your sentence starts with somebody does this, or I do this, or she does this, as opposed to starting with a object or other sentence starter. And here's the other sentence starters here that we've got. Some of the more common sentence starters in the fantasy genre, which are a 10. Down here, got some repetitive words, which we can see on our word frequency chart. So I'm guessing the story is about Monica. And then we got Chris, who's probably either an antagonist or a secondary side character. And down here we have Anna Maria. So these give you an idea of what you're talking about in your story a lot. So with that being said, we're going to move on from the summary and just dive into some of these reports. I'm really excited to get going here. The first one that I wanted to run, flipping back over just a minute, is using these gauges. Everybody has a different way of approaching AutoCrit, and my personal recommendation is to use your thumbprint first and drill down within those areas by using your gauges second. So we have generic descriptions, which is under word choice. And under generic descriptions, it will give you recommendations based on your compared to category or book of how many you should remove to stay within the standard of that compared to text. That does not mean that it's grammatically incorrect to use those words. It does not mean you have to change those words. This comes down to stylistic choice. So if you put Anne Rice in here as opposed to fantasy overall, you would have a different set of words here. If you put sci-fi instead of fantasy, you'd have a different set of words here. You need to find your tone and use AutoCrit to help you clarify your tone and make it crisp for your readers, and use that comparison tool to sort of hone that for you, basically. So we can see we use maybe a lot. We have 6 maybes here. If you click on one of these red sentences, it will take you straight to that spot in the story. And having clicked on maybe, you can see that 3 of those 6 maybes is all within a 3-sentence span.
And I love this example because it shows you that they are being used close together, but reading in the context of what I'm seeing here, it feels very intentional, especially with that third one being separated out as a start of a new paragraph. I really enjoy the fact that Jennifer made this choice of like, maybe Chris had to go to a job, maybe Anne Maria would show up, or maybe Anne Maria was dead. I like that stylistic choice. So for me, this would be one that I would just leave.
Exactly.
Like, thank you for drawing this to my attention, AutoCrit. Out of the 6, I'm leaving these 3 for sure because it was intentional. Yeah.
Right. And then we go down to looked, where there's 12. Looked is a commonly overused word, especially in fantasy and sci-fi. We do have a nifty little thesaurus option. So if you highlight the word looked and you come over here on the left-hand side, you can click on the thesaurus. And I can't even speak. Wow. The thesaurus will pull up. Normally, it's not wanting to do it for me right now, Beth.
Oh, sometimes Zoom makes it cranky.
Oh, okay. Let's see if I can go down to 100 here for just.
Oh, no, I mean, sorry, not Zoom. The broadcasting.
Okay. Well, so if you highlight it and you click the source, it will pull up an entire tab, like little tab full of options for you that you can then just click on, and it will auto insert that for you into that spot, which has been extremely helpful for me. It does that for all of your repetitive words. So you see that not only in generic descriptions, you can pull any report you want, highlight the word and hit thesaurus, and then hit the one you want to replace it with. So it's good for those, oh, what do I use? I can't remember. In mine, it's seems. She seems and he seems. So highlight it, click the thesaurus. Okay, seems, appears, resembles. You just scroll down the list and click one that better fits that phrase just to shake it up a little bit. Because most of these is talking about her direction. Looked up, Jamie looked up versus maybe Jamie glanced up. Or she peered up if he's towering over him or he's towering over her. Let's see.
Yeah, glanced. Yeah. There's so many options.
Looked over the notes. So she reviewed the notes is a situation here where maybe she doesn't even need to look at this. She reviewed the notes. Again, glance could be used here, flips through the notes. So there's a few different options. These are mostly to be guidelines. They're not to take away your style as an author or your voice as an author. It's just to say, hey, you've got 12 looks in here. Can any of those be switched up? And which of those need to stay? Versus look down here, which is 7. So between look and looked, there's 19 versions of looked in the story. So that's just an area that you could look into.
Look into that. Excellent,
look
Catherine.
into that.
Oh.
Or review and evaluate.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Oh my goodness. Let's see. Before I move on, I just wanted to glance through the comments real quick. Okay, so I think we're going to move on from here. The next report we've got up is the unnecessary filler words. And I believe this, in some regard, is either a love or a hate relationship. People either have no filler words, which can be unnerving because you read a piece of dialogue and you go, oh, would they actually say that in real life? Or they use way too many filler words. And Jennifer actually is only in, going back over here to the filler words description, she's only just barely in the gray. So we're still going to look at them, but ideally you want to stay in this blue if possible. She's got a little bit more than the average number of filler words. So scrolling down through the filler words again, could. There are 17 coulds in this story. And when I click on it, the dining room table could seat 10. That's perfectly fine. Before his father could finish the prayer. This is one where you can take the could out and just put finished. Before the father finished his prayer, the house phone rang. The long coil of cord that snaked or was able. If you want to keep the word could in here, you could change that could to was able to snake its way through the entire kitchen, because you use could again down here in the next paragraph. But I would leave this could down in the next paragraph. They could be patient. So some of these, you're just going to have to use your best judgment as a writer and also as a reader to see, does that sound natural? Does it sound too close to the other one that I just used? And there's a great feature for AutoCrit to see how natural it sounds. So you can highlight a feature, and I'm not going to do this on the live, but there's a little microphone on the left-hand side. That's your text reader. You can set your text voice in settings and choose from all these great options who will read your story, whatever you've highlighted, aloud to you. You can choose whatever grammar style you use, American, Australian, British, English, et cetera, as well. But highlight the sentences. If you're not sure how they sound, click the microphone, close your eyes, and listen to somebody read this back. If it sounds unnatural, then maybe you might want to consider tweaking it just a little bit. If you like the way it sounds, that's great. Keep on going. I found numerous errors that I missed that were not technically incorrect grammatical errors, but more content errors by having AutoCrit read my books back to me. Cannot recommend it high enough. Plus, how cool is it to have somebody read your book like an audiobook? Oh, goodness.
I love that. I use that feature all the time, especially with dialogue, because if you have, and somebody mentioned this in the comments as well, dialogue will naturally have filler words because that's how humans typically speak. So having the system read that back to me, if it sounds stilted, because I took out a filler word, then gosh, put it right back in. Absolutely.
Yep. There have been so many times just like this where it's like, oh, this could sounds very intentional. Could others tell? Could others see? That's perfect. But maybe there's sentences where they both start with the same word and you're like, oh, that sounds weird back to back like that. So,
right.
But I mean, I may or may not have been guilty of throwing some of my books in there just to hear what it'd be like if somebody auto-narrated my book.
Secrets.
I know.
while we're still in this report, and really in any of the reports, I think it was Melissa in the chat saying, like, I don't have any red in my filler words. First of all, that is awesome. So what it's telling you is there aren't any overused ones. What
Right.
you may want to do is kind of have a look through there, and you can actually click on even the non-red ones,
Right.
just to make sure that you're being very intentional. Just because it is not exceeding the benchmark and being, kind of giving you some recommendations. It's often worth it. I see what's happening here, to just have a look and make sure that your word choice is intentional around that. So
Yeah.
don't think you're off the hook 100%, but you're in a really great position.
Yeah, you definitely want to make sure that if you're really getting down to the fine details and maybe you're line editing your work using AutoCrit, that goes beyond just obvious errors and into some style choices of, yes, this is grammatically correct, but does it read the best it could read? Is this the smoothest it could read? So if you have no filler words, like excessive filler words is maybe how we should put this.
Oh yeah,
No
you're right.
filler. If you have no filler words, I can almost guarantee you need to go in and add some filler words somewhere. Because it's just natural to have filler words, especially in dialogue. It, know, feel, hear, see, things like that. It's normal. But you don't want to do it excessively. So if you don't have the bright red highlighted, excessively used ones, come down here and you can click on any of your other ones. And you can see, like in Jennifer's first chapter, within the genre that I've selected, it is literally used perfect number of times. It's used less than average. In her whole story, she has 41 it's for over 4,000 words of story. So that's great. But maybe if Jennifer's the kind of author that doesn't want a whole bunch of repetitive it's, you can go in and say what it is, or expand on that using a different word. Again, thank you, Thesaurus. For example, they pretended to like that lifestyle. The rest of these sound pretty spot on. So yeah, that's a great point, Beth, and great point to the people in our comments.
Yeah, Larry says he always, first has a look at the red and then look at all with the ones that were deselected, right? It always helps. So absolutely agree with that.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So moving on, we've got some sentence variation.
I love this.
Sentence variation is one of my favorite reports, and I know that we said Jennifer's got a good sentence variation, but I wanted people who are newer to the software for editing just to see for a minute. Again, you sort of want that waterfall effect, with under 10 being your largest category, 10 to 19 being second, and then less and less. And ideally, knowing your genre, you want very few of the super long sentences. So we're going to actually click on her 2 40+ word sentences. Every paragraph, as we're going to see in a second, should serve a purpose. And you don't want to turn a sentence into your paragraph necessarily. So if your sentence, by saying that, if your sentence has more than one purpose, a sentence should show us an action. A sentence should show us something about the scene, the world building. A sentence should show us a piece of dialogue. It should have one specific goal. And if that then rolls over into 2 or 3 goals instead of semicoloning,
great verb.
Semicolоning these sentences, you can split them off and make them separate sentences in their own paragraph. So the father was still dressed in his business suit, his dark jacket unbuttoned at the waist, and he held his forearms against the table. I would note that parentheses are hardly ever used in fantasy specifically, but if you're as opposed to like an N dash, an EN dash, or an EM M dash, or commas, depending on your manual of style. So with his forearms against the table, as he clasped his hands in a mimic of supplication. This one's very long, but it doesn't lose me, and it's all about describing the Father here and what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I would leave this one the way it is. The next sentence, well, it says there's two, but I only see one.
Try scrolling down just a little bit. Maybe it's just below the break there.
Okay. Yep. It could just be because I've got it so big too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This second sentence is also pretty long. I usually recommend looking out for things like colons. Again, M dashes and things like that. But that's just a minor editing bonus tip for today.
I'm a huge M dash fan, so I feel that for sure.
I underuse the M dash so much. I'm sure that my actual person editor that gets the post AutoCrit version of my book, she's like, please start using M dashes, Catherine. Here, but I use Chicago Manual style to edit my books, and it took me a while to break the parentheses. So I'm right there with you, Jennifer, right there with you. All right. So you can definitely, though, go through here and look at that. You can also click on paragraphs, and the paragraph variation will take you through the same thing. Just click on whichever category. Like this one is 100+ words. That's a pretty long paragraph. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining the purpose of that paragraph. And this paragraph, it sets it up to be what is going on between this character and his parents.
Mm-hmm.
So if that then shifts to another topic mid-sentence, or mid-paragraph, which it doesn't, we would need to go in and make that shorter. So again, having it as a 4 doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. It just gives you a guideline of, hey, this is a very long sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Or
sentence, paragraph, paragraph.
And this one is a perfect example of one that I would split. You've got, here's something about him, and then it skips to what she's doing present tense, which meant she had 45 minutes to prepare. And then I would skip that down to a new paragraph to talk about what she's doing to prepare, mixed with Jamie.
Oh, I like that.
And that's just a suggestion. These are all just suggestions. This is still your book. But it would make it shorter, and it would keep that top half is about him and what's going on, that they're having a meeting, that he has he's a new client. And then down below, it's solely about her. It's no longer about the meeting anymore. No longer about the guy she's meeting. Instead, it's about her and Jamie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that it has such a natural break, right, where you put that, and it does really encapsulate the topic or the focus of that paragraph quite well with the split that you just put in there. I really like that change. I agree. I'm seeing some folks in the comments saying things like, gosh, a wall of text will make me put that book right down. Like, yeah, think of your reader's experience, and as they look at your book and they're reading, whether it's on a Kindle or on a paper version, whatever it is, that wall of text can get fatiguing, right? So think about how your reader's experience and how you can use paragraph variation, sentence length variation, both to control the pacing of your story as well, right?
Yes. And I mean, just to say, for those of you who have not read The Princess Bride, which is a phenomenal book if you can survive the insane long introduction, it's one of my favorite books, minus the introduction. He is known for insanely long paragraphs. And it took me years to read it because it was just so long looking at that. And going back, I go, okay, if he had broken that paragraph up here, 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 and here, it would have been so much easier to read. You're not just breaking it up by purpose of the paragraph, but also to prevent the reader's fatigue, because readers naturally blink at the end of sentences more often, and they stop and do sort of a mini process mid-paragraph without thinking about it, where there's a break. So if you're giving a whole bunch of really important backstory or details about the living room furniture or the amazing feast, then it's going to be harder for them to remember those details without being given a break to process it real quick before they move on.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I love that.
yeah.
I love the science behind this stuff, right? The neuroscience around like processing those images mentally and committing them into your memory, and having reader fatigue breaking in the middle of that as well. I see a couple comments in our YouTube live stream around what should that paragraph variation report look like? Should it look like a waterfall as well, similar to how the sentence variation one sentences by word count? And I feel like that really kind of depends. You really want definitely waterfall in terms of like having fewer of the long paragraphs. But if you get into that under 25, it may vary by genre, right? Of
Right.
what you want your story to look like. If I'm writing a pacey, fast-paced thriller, for example, I'm going to have a far more of those short paragraphs, right?
Exactly. And
So
it'll drop your age level too. You have to be careful with too many short paragraphs. Like I finished reading a middle grade fantasy for a review that's already published called Luna Reyes and the Emperor of Light this week. And being middle grade fantasy, the majority of the sentences and paragraphs are very short. I'd say there are several 2 to 3 sentence tops paragraphs in that book versus an epic fantasy like maybe Lord of the Rings or one of the Timothy Zahn Star Wars film books if you're a sci-fi fan. Where there's going to be a lot longer paragraphs. I think in fantasy, most of the time I see almost a triangle laying on its side, so like an arrow, sort of like hers, where there's more in the 25 to 49 word count range, and then it should taper down on the one above and the one below. I don't see a lot of 100 plus word count paragraphs, which is why I clicked on those for the sake of this report. But the first one that we saw was perfect. It looked great. It all served the same purpose. It didn't bog the story down. The second one, it shifts purpose midways, which is why I recommended splitting it. So you can just read it over and go, okay, I have a 75 word plus paragraph. Does it maintain the purpose of my paragraph? And am I going to lose my reader somewhere?
The other interesting thing about this report and the view that we have on the screen right now, in my opinion, is you do want to vary, right? What you don't want to see is like everything stockpiled into one word range, right? That means your paragraphs are very very, very similar in length. So you're not amping up the tension, ramping down the tension. You're not accelerating with action. So think about just having the variation, which is terrific. And then the more details around longer paragraphs. Should it be split? Is it going to present as a wall of text? Those are some of the things that we're looking at here.
Yeah. And just remember too, what genre you're playing into as far as dialogue. I think I might have seen something about this in the comments. Dialogue and whether you do buried dialogue, which is the newer sort of becoming a trendier way of including your dialogue sentence on its own line and then continuing your paragraph after it, which was a big no-no in publishing for a very long time and still is in some genres, versus putting all of your dialogue on its own line and keeping that paragraph, if you will, solely for the dialogue. So that's a decision you'll have to make on your own for the tone you want your book to have. So this is a perfect example of a typical dialogue here. Chris, welcome back. I was just going over my notes from last time, and then it puts what's going on in between that sentence and the next sentence, and that stands as a paragraph. Versus if all he had said was this and he wasn't going to say anything else, I would leave that as its own paragraph and then go down and put this as its own paragraph. Traditionally speaking, unless you're deliberately going for the buried dialogue look.
Catherine, would you mind clicking on that view summary for us quickly on this report?
Yes, let's see here. View summary.
Yeah, I love this, right? So looking
Yep.
at your pacing and your variation, yep, Larry just commented that the paragraph variation chart in view summary, so helpful. It's
Yes.
really good to see your variation, and you can kind of get the roller coaster ride you're taking your readers on at the bird's eye view here. Now,
Yes.
of course, when I look at this one, I see that one very long one is kind of right there, sticking up like the Empire State Building. So,
Yeah, that's what we just split in half.
yeah, yeah.
And of course, so that's important to know. I did not rerun this report before I clicked this. Your changes that you make, you need to make sure after you make them, you click save and then rerun your report. Otherwise, your changes are not going to be saved. So split your paragraph off. And if you want to keep that paragraph the same, go to your little floppy disk button, click save, and then rerun the report. And this will be updated to reflect that she cut that paragraph in half.
Yeah. Great.
All right. So let's see here. So we've gone through our filler words, our showing versus telling, our generic descriptions. Adverbs were great. The adverb report is super fantastic if you're a fantasy user. I'm not going to say all authors struggle with adverbs because obviously, Jennifer, you have got this adverb thing down. You should in your ways. But I've read so many books where the author, including myself, just goes way overboard on adverbs. We come up with the most creative adverbs.
Oh, yeah. That's the fantasy writer in you, girl. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So everybody who's watching who's not fantasy is like, oh, I'm so glad I don't have that problem. But you do need some adverbs, though. I would say, especially the horror and thriller genre, knowing how things are done adds to a level of I guess setting of the tone of the scene, maybe a little more than in a fantasy. So that is our overall summary and some starter points for Jennifer with her report live. And again, she has all these other tabs that she can go through with multiple reports in all of them, but I'm mostly trying to stick with the word choice and strong writing for hers because those were the two biggest indicators. Once you get those down, you can rerun your summary report, and you may be surprised to see that some of those indicators are going to change, and maybe you then have a new thing to go look into. Welcome to the world of editing.
Right. And Catherine, you mentioned at the start of our show today that, everyone does have their own particular way that they like to use AutoCrit in terms of where to start and what to dig into first. So just a couple of examples around that, where Catherine chose today to dig into word choice and strong writing off the fingerprint. Kevin on our team prefers to go from left to right in those tabs across the top.
Yep.
Gareth likes to go straight to something like filler words because they're so easy to do.
Right.
I like to go for something that's a low number on my fingerprint because I love a quick win, right? That one pacing and momentum only has 19 things. Let me get in there, re-architect some of those, get the pacing and momentum where I want it, and that one's done. Plus, it's a big structural kind of thing, so digging into that one right away gives me a nice solid foundation to work from. So how you, as a user, choose to attack your manuscript using AutoCrit is totally up to you. So
that's right.
There is no wrong way. I mean, the only wrong way is to just not do it, in my opinion. But
and I know there's a lot of great support in both our Mighty Networks community and our Facebook community. If you get stuck, I've seen a lot of questions about reports come up before, like, hey, what does this report mean? How do I get around this? Definitely lean on your peers. And we have the Story Doctor, excuse me, the Story Doctor inspections too, where if there's just one thing that you just cannot get through, we are happy to help you fix that because we are like, we want you to succeed. That's why we're here. We want your stories to do well and your books to do well. When this competition's over and you're like, oh, I've got to keep writing now because AutoCrit's addictive and I want something just to put in there.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. And I love what Larry put in the comments. I'm just going to pull this up on the screen real quick for us. So Larry says, my first manuscript was done with the basic AutoCrit membership. Since upgrading, my work has not only gotten better, my initial writing is levels better. I love this. So Larry, I call this sneaky learning, right? So what we're seeing with Larry and with so many of our users is as you use AutoCrit and it just gently kind of shows you some of those recommendations, you'll find that you're more subconsciously aware of it as you're doing your initial drafts, right? With your very first use of AutoCrit on your very first draft, maybe you've got a very high number in repetition. As you work through the edits of that, it kind of, again, with the brain, right? It just kind of sinks in and it improves your initial draft writing. So
and
again,
I can just say, Larry, yes.
Yes.
It reads definitely like it's gone through AutoCrit. And I see a great point on here that I actually meant to mention. So I'm so glad, Melissa, that you brought this up. When Will is the name of your character versus a tense, there is definitely a place where you can go, click on your little bubble, click on settings again, which is where we got to that read aloud portion earlier, and come down to personal words and character names. And from there, you can update your list of character names. Mine are all fantasy names, so I'm going to go ahead and just take those down. But they're not just for fantasy names. You know, some people like me, I take them out just because I don't want them making my grammar scores look atrocious. Mm-hmm. But names like Will, definitely put it on there so that it's listed under your character names, and you can choose on here to exclude that from your reports. If you want to, there's a couple other lists here, and phrases to include in your personal words and phrases report, which is maybe where you want to put Will, mm-hmm. because it's a name and you might want to make sure you're using the right name on everything. Mm-hmm. The names down here will include them on your POV consistency report. So personally, when I get a fantasy name, I usually put it on all three lists, mm-hmm. because I don't want it to show up on my grammar issues list. I also don't want it to bog down some of my other lists, but I do want it listed in my POV consistency report, and I also want to make sure it's included in my personal words and phrases report.
Mm-hmm. So you can see exactly where it is. And I think a couple people have some terrific points in the chat around things like overused words and etc. Things like Disney Fanatic says, except for words like banana and ice cream and chocolate. And first of all, it's lunchtime and now I'm starving and I really want ice cream and bananas and chocolate. So can't wait to read your story.
A banana split now.
Yes, right. So you can put those words like banana, ice cream, etc. in your words to exclude report, because there aren't really, what's a synonym for banana? I mean, you don't want to, I think our fan mentioned that before, like you're gonna sound really pretentious if you try to come up with another word for banana, like yellow tumescent fruit and blah blah blah. Like, so you can put that in your words to exclude. I would put them in there and run some reports with those words in the list, but then also go back and run through with those words not in the list. And here's why. It's still going to read weird if you have the word ice cream. It might still read weird, right? If you have the word ice cream in a lot of like clumped together, or chocolate, or any word, especially something that's a little bit unique, ice cream, banana, chocolate, then you can certainly still give a reader a weird experience, right, if they're clumped together, and just maybe rephrase it, not necessarily look for a synonym, but kind of align the structure of the sentence or paragraph. That might be helpful. So I recommend doing those both ways. And the other thing that Larry pointed out for Rich as his character, those excluded words don't apply to the Power Words report.
Yeah.
And here's why. If you name your character Rich or Hope or whatever, or Lucky, I had a customer with that character name as well. You don't want to exclude that from the Power Words report because
Right.
the words are still present on the page, and that's what's influencing your reader.
Right.
So if you write a story about someone named Rich, the vibe is still going to kind of come through as agreed, rich, money, power kind of thing. And that's something to be aware of, right? So when you do the excluded words, they will not be excluded from your Power Words because they're still present on the page and they're still giving that emotional reaction.
Yes. Oh, well, Disney fanatic.
Look, I got to pull that one up. This needs to go on the screen right now. This needs to go on the screen right now. Okay.
Oh my
The
goodness.
banana split is the murder weapon. And now the line forms to the left for people who now want to read about the story.
And now I'm rethinking, do I really want that banana split?
Feel like it could be dangerous. Could be quite
Oh,
dangerous.
Man. Living on the edge here with AutoCrit.
Create Disney fanatic. Have you been through our horror writing course? I feel like I might know who you are.
You know, Beth, you made a great point about the repetitive, how many times you say ice cream in that paragraph too. It could be an example with, if you have filler words to spare, that might be a place to use some of your filler words. You know, if you say ice cream, or in this case, the banana split was blank, 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 then you may not have to repeat the banana split was, the banana split was, the banana split was over and over and over in that paragraph. You can say it was, or, you know, my dessert was, or something like that. You know, you don't want to go overboard. You can still say banana split as much as you want, but, you know, it's an example of where some filler words are not always bad.
Right.
You do need some of them.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. We have a quick question as we approach the end of our time here together. A quick question from LJ. Is there a way to group ignored characters by book? Not currently, but that I believe might be something we're considering for a future enhancement, to be able to kind of, right now they are at the account level, right? So if Catherine puts in all her character names, everything that she runs through that is going to have those character names associated with it.
Yes.
But great suggestion for possible future enhancement. I'm gonna toss that one. Just make a quick note and toss that one over to Kevin. Let's see.
I think my list gets longer and longer. I'm now on my 4th AutoCrit book editing, and so my list of character names just has gotten longer and longer and longer as the book goes on, or books get added. But I try to use characters. I hardly ever reuse a character name book to book. If you do, like, let's say you're writing a series and you're wanting to keep some characters and take some characters out, an easy way that I've found to use it as a get around, while Beth notes for the team, but this would be great, is I have a Microsoft Word style guide that has all my characters, and I just keep a chunk at the bottom where I can copy and paste out for AutoCrit.
Yeah.
Which is sort of an old-fashioned maybe workaround, but since I have to have a style guide for the editor anyway, so they know that the spellings of all these crazy fantasy names are right, I might as well just keep the AutoCrit thing on the bottom there until, in the meantime.
Sure. Well, absolutely. Why not? Yeah. That is our recommended approach for that. Copy them, paste them in there. Good to go. Easy peasy. Lemon squeezy. I just had to finish that whole phrase there. The cliche, it would show up in my AutoCrit report. So.
So lemon. So now we've got lemon to add to our banana split.
Oh, well, that's weird. That's weird, isn't it?
Oh, goodness.
So, great question from Chuck. And this is an interesting stylistic choice. A dozen or more quotes in a row, conversations, short sentences, separated as paragraphs. Bad form?
It depends on what you mean by paragraphs. Like, my rule of thumb from a developmental edit standpoint is it should be clear who's speaking. If your dialogue has a tag every once in a while to remind us who's saying what line, great. You can go down the page and you'll have a page of dialogue. Now, if you do that for your whole book and you have multiple pages that are just one sentence dialogues, that might be a little like the opposite of the Princess Bride effect we talked about earlier. But lumping multiple characters' dialogue into one paragraph then sort of shoots the purpose of that paragraph. Because again, the purpose of the paragraph is to show us a specific thing. So it can, burying your dialogue from more than one person can make it confusing. So we're hearing a point from one person, that's a paragraph. And then we need a point from the next person, that's also a paragraph. So I don't typically recommend doing multiple different characters all speaking in the same chunk of paragraph.
Yeah. And I love the idea of that back and forth, rapid fire. It'll kind of pace things along. It'll move things forward. It will, if you don't break it with some sort of character action, people just fly right through it reading wise. Fly. It's so pacey, slippery almost, right? They'll just slide right through it. So anchoring it periodically with a dialogue tag or with a character action to kind of keep it anchored. That's the word I'm going for. Yeah. And if it's a couple of characters at a time, totally. It's a great way to drop dialogue tags. You don't want to be constantly like, he said, she said, he said, she said.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You don't want to have floating heads.
Floating heads, yes.
Reading for 5 minutes. And the same thing is for super long quotes by one person, right? You open it up and then we've all read it, the paragraph long dialogue of history, and then no end quote, and it continues in a second paragraph long. What is the other character doing in this? Are they bored? Are they interested? Are they thumping their foot? Are they nodding their head? Like, have they gazed off somewhere? Are they enraptured by what they're listening to? You can break those two paragraphs up there and keep the reader anchored to the scene. And the short sentences sort of need the same thing. You need a little bit of break up there.
Yeah,
like Beth said, so that you're not floating in space listening to people talk.
Yes, right. It's floating in space, and if you're thinking about it from the character's viewpoint, right? How likely is it that two people are literally just standing still and talking to each other and not doing anything else, like moving their arms, or picking up a pen, or walking across the room? So think about those character actions as a way to break that up and anchor them. So.
Yeah, we had a great one from somebody in our community this week, and I just thought it was fantastic, where it was two aliens and they were talking to each other, and there's actually a note about 5 sentences in, and he's like, it unnerves me how perfectly still the aliens are standing facing each other without the slightest facial expression while they're speaking. And I'm just like, that's wonderful, because it paints such a perfect image in your head, and also explains why there's nothing going on in between their sentences.
So let's take one more question. I know we're going a little bit over our allotted time today, but I wanted to see if we could grab this one for Ghislaine. When you write and it's someone else telling the story, should you put ellipses? I'm not sure that that's necessary. Catherine, can you give us a quick note on how ellipses are typically used?
Well, this is going to vary greatly by the style of English you're writing and the style guide you use. So again, my default is Chicago Manual style. And with that being said, an ellipses is where something trails off. So they're telling the story at the campfire and she falls asleep. The last sentence she hears could have an ellipses at the end. And then she falls asleep and dreams of banana splits. But if it's an interruption, so I'm telling a story and then all of a sudden the kid's like, I'm tired of this. This is boring. That would usually be an M dash, where it's the long dash and then the end closing quote, because they were interrupted. It's like an
abrupt transition or ending.
Right. Yep. Or they stop because they stumble over something, or they remember something out of the blue like I do, and they're like, oh, that
squirrel.
It's like long M dash and then dash. But every style guide is different too. When I edit for UK English, it isn't always the same. So those are usually like your ellipses and a comma. So it's going to depend on what style guide you're using. But that's
Yep.
the idea. Trails off, gets the dot, dot, dot. It doesn't normally need a tag because it's implied that they're trailing off. And then M dash if they're getting interrupted, usually followed by why they were interrupted or why they've stopped talking.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, and on this note, I don't care if it does kill me. I really want a banana split now. Couldn't agree more. I think for today, we will adjourn and we can all go have the treat of our choice. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Catherine, thanks for taking us through AutoCrit with Jennifer's story. And we look forward to getting that final submission on Monday, the 24th. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Don't forget, we have another episode of The Story Doctor, the short story focused Story Doctor, tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, right here on YouTube. So join us live for that. And we will see you all tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.